Hello, everyone. My name is Shelby Moore, and I'm going to be providing you with lecture videos for all of the various chapters for macro and microeconomics. First up, we're going to share one of 4 total videos for chapter 1, and this chapter is going to be the same across macro and microeconomics. If you're just taking your first economics class, and that's macroeconomics, this will all be new information to you. If you're taking microeconomics this semester, this chapter will help you with some review before we get into new concepts. So first up, in this video, we'll cover the 5 foundations of economics. There's 2 big questions that we want to answer, and that's what do we think of when we think of economics, and then how can we study economics as students? Well, to answer those 2 big questions, we have to first look at the difference between macro and microeconomics. After we do that, we'll be able to fully learn the 5 foundations that economists use to study economics. Within economics, there are 2 main areas of study that we're going to focus on, and those are macro and microeconomics. The 5 foundations of economics that you might want to write down are incentives, trade-offs, opportunity cost, marginal thinking, and that trade creates value. We'll cover each of these foundations in more detail as we work throughout this entire chapter, but these are themes that you'll see throughout the entirety of your textbook in both macro and microeconomics. So a question for you to think about is, what do you think of whenever you hear the term economics? A lot of times, students that are first taking macro have never had an economics course, and that's okay. But everybody has a little bit of experience with economics in their own daily life. A lot of times students are confused as to why economics counts as a social science in their gen ed courses, but there's a lot of value to be gathered from studying economics and understanding these basic foundations as you move forward into college and your adult life. Now, a lot of times people think that economists only study these large-scale, big world events. These are considered to be macroeconomics issues. So when you think about macroeconomics, that's more big picture. But as we get deeper and deeper into economics, our microeconomics will look at more of those pinpointed or specific questions. So what is economics? Economics is the study of how individuals and societies allocate their limited resources to satisfy their practically unlimited wants. It's a social science that studies how people behave. Because we're studying how people behave under conditions of scarcity, economics is a social science. All of this to say, economics tells us how people make decisions when we have essentially unlimited wants but limited resources. In these scenarios, which are the inherently limited nature of society's resources, given our unlimited wants and needs, we come up with the term scarcity. Scarcity basically just means that we have more wants than we do available items to satisfy those wants and needs. So unlimited wants are going to exceed limited resources, and this is why scarcity exists and why choices have to be made. A lot of times students like to think of resources in a broad sense, but consider that this is not just physical resources, but things like your time as well. Are you going to spend time studying and give up social time with your friends? Are you going to give up study time and spend time with your friends? These are all instances of scarcity because you have these unlimited wants. You want to be able to study to do well. You want to be able to socialize and hang out with your friends. You want to go do fun things, but you also want to be able to pay your rent and groceries, things like that. All of these instances relate to scarcity, and the choices that you make are the things that economists study on a larger scale to see how we deal with that scarcity. Keep in mind that economists want to answer how we're going to make decisions about these resources, but you can really try to think of it in that more personal sense as well. So let's do a bit of a practice question really quickly. The question asked here is, what can be said about scarcity? So I'll give you a second to look over those answer choices, and keep in mind, these practice what you know questions may come up on an exam. I would recommend as you're watching these videos or reading through the slides that you do make note of these practice questions. The correct answer to this question is choice A. Scarcity forces us to make choices. So we have those unlimited wants, but we do have limited resources. That is scarcity in itself. And because of that, we are forced to make choices. Now, the reason that option B is not correct is because even super wealthy people have a limited amount of time and other resources. So they still do have to make decisions, and they are still impacted by scarcity, albeit not in the same way that everybody else is. Scarcity does not only affect commodities such as oil, because it is applicable to every single choice you make in your daily life. And because of that, scarcity does greatly affect our day-to-day living, and that's why answer choice D would not be a great choice. Now, to wrap up this first video for chapter 1, I'm just going to break down some brief differences in macro and microeconomics. Overall, the main takeaway is that macroeconomics is going to focus more on big picture, while microeconomics is going to focus on individuals, businesses, and industries. Questions that we might ask in macroeconomics are things like, what is the current level of inflation? Or how much has employment grown in India over the past 20 years? We might also ask things like, what will happen to the US economy if the federal government raises taxes? Or how does federal debt affect the economy? When studying microeconomics, we might ask questions like, how many movies does a specific family see each year? Or what factors affect a person's career choice? We might also ask, how would an increase in minimum wage affect teenage employment? Or how does health insurance alter a patient's demand for healthcare services? It's important to note that macroeconomics is more than just an aggregation of microeconomic issues. It also looks at completely different topics like government policy, economic growth, international trade, and monetary supply. These are all things that we'll cover in more depth in later videos, but I hope that you've enjoyed this first look at Chapter 1 for macro and microeconomics. Thank you.